lot of the rhetoric we've heard from Donald Trump has been seized on by terrorists.
As Secretary of State, she allowed thousands of criminal aliens to be released.
Donald Trump is being used as a recruiting sergeant for the terrorists.
My opponent has the most open borders policy of anyone ever to seek the presidency.
Good afternoon and welcome into Hour 2 of America Talks Live. This is an interactive news program that welcomes you, your questions, your comments, your phone calls. I'm J.D. Hayworth, and the number for you to call is 1-877-639-7629. That's 1-877-NEWSMAX. Now, during the upcoming hour, we'll take up the angles and the stories that the alphabet networks just failed to spell out to our mutual satisfaction. Stories they stay away from because, well, they just don't meet the alphabet network's standards of minding their P's and Q's. What we just heard to begin this program, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump launching verbal attacks against one another in the wake of this weekend's terror attacks. For more on this story, we are pleased to be joined here on the anchor desk by former CIA analyst Lisa Ruth, and we're also joined by former New York Police Department Special Investigator Michael Solomon. Michael is the author of the book, The Conversion Prophecy, and we appreciate both of you taking time to be with us here on America Talks Live. So, Michael, we find out in the aftermath of the bombing that the prime suspect's nickname was Mad. He's a deadbeat dad. He has a record seemingly a mile long, leading some who engage in doggerel to say, once again, we've been had. You take a look, and always in the aftermath, I know hindsight can be 20/20, but weren't there enough alarm bells about the prime suspect to alert authorities?
Absolutely. You know, a guy like that's a pillar of the community. I mean, let's face it, he owned a chicken store and he was, he was keeping everybody fed. But political correctness is triumphing once again, JD. I'm telling you that everybody's afraid to say something and see something, If we go back to what happened out in California, in San Bernardino, I mean, they knew what the neighbor was doing. They were afraid of being called a racist. So even his friends who said he's changed when he came back from Afghanistan, I mean, they wouldn't say anything. So it comes down to, even though we've profiled them and we've looked at them and they couldn't find anything wrong, these guys are trained how to beat these profiles. They know it. I mean, that's why they go over there.
Well, to that point, Lisa Ruth, the New York Times, has sent out a breaking news alert saying the father of this man reported him to authorities back in 2014. Now, we've also heard talk that there could be some complicitness among family members in this. I know, and we joke from time to time about a rivalry, different jurisdiction for CIA and FBI, but has the FBI under the Obama administration become so culturally sensitive that they're staying away from what in essence is the handwriting on the wall?
Yeah, unfortunately, my view is the FBI is a law enforcement agency. It's really not an intelligence agency. So if they're looking at whether a crime has taken place, first of all, it's too late. At the point when you're cleaning it up, we already know it's happened. If you don't get intelligence involved early, this is a case where, as you said, every dot was out there, but there was nobody connecting them. And the FBI was looking at individual actions, but not the whole picture. And I think we missed it badly. And I don't know if it's political correctness or lack of ability, but intelligence organizations have got to get involved.
So take me through. Our British cousins have MI5, correct? There is domestic intelligence in addition to Scotland Yard. Correct. Is it time for an American MI5, or is that what's supposed to be the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, it should be. Again, unfortunately, that has created more bureaucracy rather than less. And if you look back at the FBI, Philip Mudd, who was a CIA analyst who was supposed to be head of FBI but got in trouble for waterboarding, one of the things he tried to bring in was intelligence into the FBI. But you're trying to bring about a culture shift. And New York certainly has made an effort at that level to try to get intelligence on the ground. And I think some of that, people aren't talking about it, but it's because you're not getting the FBI coming in. You're not getting a federal agency directing intelligence. So local police forces, like the New York police force, have had to come in and do it themselves. It's inexcusable, in my opinion.
Michael, we have a situation that has developed in this country, especially over the past 2 decades, really beginning with the first World Trade Center bombing, you know, that where Democratic administrations say we have to treat this as a law enforcement matter, and Republican administrations have said we need to treat this as an act of war happening on our soil. And indeed, Mr. Trump yesterday on the stump lamented the fact that this suspect will now get the best lawyers, the best medical treatment, and of course our veterans continue to go wanting. Against that context, should Rahami be treated as an enemy combatant instead of afforded the rights and privileges of a naturalized citizen?
Absolutely. And let me tell you what the problem is in this country. A lone wolf is not a lone wolf. A lone wolf is an Islamic radical terrorist. Just because he's here and he's radicalized in this country, he is part of the problem. It's an ideology. And unless we recognize the ideology and call it what it is, we're never going to defeat it. So to tell me that he's an American citizen, but he's been radicalized, he's fighting for the enemy. And the enemy is our enemy, and that's the way it has to be. And, you know, and see something, say something, we hear that all the time. I would rather say something and be wrong than not say something and be wrong.
And we want our viewers to say something at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Now, why don't we hear Donald Trump in his own words yesterday campaigning in Florida?
And Congress should pass measures to ensure that foreign enemy combatants are treated as such. These are enemies, these are combatants, and we have to be tough and we have to be strong.
Lisa Ruth, your take on what Mr. Trump had to say.
Well, it's a yes and no answer. I do think that he's an American citizen. You have to look at that for the starting point. But at the same time, at the point when you've got a terrorist, and I don't actually care whether they were radicalized overseas or not. This is someone who probably, his ties may be to the Taliban or to Al-Qaeda. It's unclear. But the fact is, it's someone who's committed a crime. And that's really no different than someone who commits blowing up a Oklahoma courthouse. You know, you have got to be tougher and you have to put real strong lines out there.
I don't know. I know we have a new technology developing, a so-called virtual reality. I don't know what you describe what's going on in the current White House, but Josh Earnest, who is the presidential press secretary, his name, in fact, sounds as if he's making a joke about telling the truth. Josh Earnest showed up yesterday on MSNBC, and I guess we would talk about him being a Rhodes scholar in terms of Ben Rhodes, who put forth this fantastic notion that we have competing narratives. A story that was revealing but much maligned in the Sunday magazine of the New York Times a couple of months ago. Anyway, check out Josh Earnest yesterday on MSNBC's Morning Joe.
We can't give in to this narrative that ISIL wants to build up, that the United States is at war with Islam. That is false. That is not true. And we can't, with some of this rhetoric, we can't allow that kind of narrative victory to be given to them.
Hey, Michael, do you think the 29 victims of the bombing in New York on Saturday night in Chelsea, were they somehow wounded by a narrative or by a bomb?
They were, you know, again, it's political correctness is triumphing. People are afraid to say something, and the American public can't be fooled. I mean, these people aren't stupid out there. They know exactly what's going on. They see what's going on. I mean, this is Saturday night. People are out having a good time. It's Chelsea, New York. It's a great place to be, restaurants and shopping and whatever, and they're disturbing our way of life. They're trying to disturb us economically by causing a panic, and people are going to be out there and they're going to be afraid to go out shopping. They're going to be afraid to go out to dinner, and that's what they want to do. And it's become, as I said, it's become a philosophy that they're trying to put on us. I've read the Quran from cover to cover. I did it for research in my last book, and I got to tell you, it's frightening. If you really want to know what they're planning out there, read the Quran and you'll see what it says. It'll tell you right there.
So, Lisa Ruth, let me ask you, obviously, there are things you cannot talk about for those years of affiliation at Langley with the CIA. But did you ever run across an intelligence assessment based on, quote, competing narratives?
No, and even the whole discussion to me gets, is it ISIS, is it Taliban, is it Al-Qaeda? It really doesn't matter. The fact is, this is someone who set out to do harm to our way of life, as Michael said, to do harm to us. And keep in mind, a lot of terror is not even those poor victims. It's all of us who are looking over our shoulders now going, you know what, we're not going to go out, we're going to stay in. That's what terror does.
Well, President Obama was front and center at the United Nations for the opening of the General Assembly today, and it is allegedly his final time as our Commander-in-Chief, going there to lecture the delegates of the General Assembly. And our Commander-in-Chief said with a straight face, quote, "We are winning the war on terror." Take a look.
We've taken away terrorist safe havens, strengthened the non-proliferation regime, resolved the Iranian nuclear issue through diplomacy.
I'm surprised the chamber didn't just erupt in laughter about that Iranian assessment. Your take on that, Michael?
It's funny, I was listening to it when I was in my car. I was listening to it on a Sirius radio, and I said, I can't believe I'm hearing this. I mean, it was like deja vu. I said, what are we doing here? I mean, it just goes back to 93 with the first World Trade bombing, when they said, oh, it was a criminal act and we're going to treat the, you know. This is terrorism from A to Z. There is no way around it. And we have not won the war. The war is ongoing. That war has been lasting for 1,400 years, and it's still going on. If you read the Quran and you go back and you see the history of what was going on between the Shiites and the Sunnis and everybody else after Muhammad left, that war is a battle that's going on. It's them against us, and us is everybody who's not in their belief, in their corner.
Lisa Ruth, final 30 seconds to you. Just in terms of assessing this White House, we understand now the president, as Commander-in-Chief, is not even speaking to the military generals, such as the disdain and the chemistry there. Is it naivete on the part of this president, or a worldview that's just at odds with conservatives in the United States?
Yeah, and I wish I knew the answer. I can tell you that not talking to your generals at a time when you're in war is just a bad choice. That much I can tell you.
Well, we want to stay in touch on this, and we want you to be part of this. So that's why we invite your calls again at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629 as we continue this discussion. Now, how big a role will border security play in the upcoming presidential election? Lisa and Michael will assess the situation on our border, and we'll take your calls as we continue.
There have been Islamic terrorist attacks in Minnesota and New York City and in New Jersey. These attacks and many others were made possible because of our extremely open immigration system, which fails to properly vet and screen the individuals or families coming into our country.
Continuing now on America Talks Live, that, of course, Donald Trump on the stump yesterday in Florida, reacting to the most recent terror attacks and blaming our faulty immigration system. Now, our phones are not faulty. We invite your calls, your questions, your comments at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. Back at our anchor desk, welcoming in once again former CIA analyst Lisa Ruth and former New York Police Special Investigator Michael Solomon. Again, Michael is the author of the book The Conversion Prophecy, and we appreciate you hanging around here at the anchor desk on America Talks Live. And I tell you what, why don't we go to the phones right now? And our first call comes to us from Middletown, New Jersey. Here is John. John, welcome to America Talks Live.
Thank you for this time. I just had something I think is very important. That is the three religions that the Jews, the Christians, and Islam have what they all call him Father, and that's Abraham, the story of Abraham. You're probably familiar with it,
yes,
right?
Yes, indeed.
And I wanted to hone in on chapter 16 where it talks about who the first Arab is, because nobody, since this whole thing's been going on with Islam, nobody talks about, like, well, let's go back to where this all started. Well, it started with Abraham's first son in chapter 16 of Genesis, which, for those that don't know, is the very first book in the Bible.
Right, in Genesis, and it's, I believe, Ishmael, am I correct?
Ishmael, right?
Ishmael, yes. And so you are actually echoing what Michael had to talk about, the centuries where this has gone on, and obviously it is a part of Scripture that we find in the Old Testament. But in the here and now, regardless of the history, when we take a look at ISIS, Lisa Ruth, the genesis of ISIS is far more recent than the conflict that harkens back to Old Testament days.
Sure. And it grew out of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria. But ISIS is also unique, as you know very well, in that it is the first one to actually keep and hold territory. And one interesting point to me, as we were talking about the terrorist attacks, is you can say we are winning this war. We need to be very, very careful. It's the winning for losing idea, because every time we have a success on the ground against ISIS, keep in mind that's when they do things like behead Americans or take hostages or launch terrorist attacks. So I think you have to be very careful when we talk about beating ISIS and what that means. That it's not just as simple as bombing something. And I think when you talk about what the administration is missing, it's the larger question of Islam and where it's really putting out its tentacles and roots. And in order to defeat it, it's going to take something far more than what we're doing right now.
Yep, some of these airstrikes have been more than passing curious. They've been referred to as pinpricks. Exactly. And you're not going to beat a growing modern Islamic caliphate with the likes of pinpricks. Nope. From pinpricks to telephone calls, back to our phone now at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629, to Montgomery, Alabama, where Carl is watching us this afternoon. Hi, Carl.
Hi.
And we welcome you. What's on your mind this afternoon, Carl?
I've lived overseas, in Cairo, Egypt, and as a Christian, they don't tolerate our points of views. They don't tolerate our religion. So why should we tolerate the Muslims being here with us? They want to assimilate, but they want to bring their hateful religion against Christians, against the Jewish, to America.
And certainly the change is coming. Carl, we thank you for the call and what you saw and how you interpreted it on the ground in Cairo, Egypt. Michael Solomon, we talk about what we've seen in the wake of the so-called Arab Spring, and it has not been a full flower of diversity of opinion and freedom of religion in countries like Egypt that Carl has spoken about, even though the new president of Egypt, out from under the cloud of the Muslim Brotherhood, is trying to bring reforms there. But the larger point, in a constitutional republic, where do we set limits on freedom of thought, freedom of religion, and how do we bring this back to our immigration system, where we as a nation have an absolute right to determine who comes into this country?
Well, the problem is when we have a test for citizenship in this country and we swear in new citizens, the first thing they do is they recite the Pledge of Allegiance and they pledge their honor and oath to the United States and to our flag. The problem is we don't know if some of these people we're bringing in who maybe do that pledge or want to do that pledge are really actually telling the truth. Are they hiding behind a false sense? The other thing is we don't know who these people are who are coming in. We don't know what their religious backgrounds are. We've got people coming to our southern borders who are learning to speak Spanish, even though they may be of Muslim descent. Mexico now wants to build a wall on their southern border to Guatemala and Central America because they're getting inundated. And the problem is that, and the other thing is, this is a free society in America. We tolerate everybody's religion. Everybody, no matter what you believe, and that's the way it's always been. It started with the Declaration of Independence when we didn't, because we're one nation under God, and the First Amendment to the Constitution was written that way for freedom of religion because we don't want people coming in this country the way the Pilgrims came in, and bashing their religious rights the way the King George did in England.
We don't want to see an establishment of a state religion,
right?
And obviously,
the ACLU has got it backwards because it's not religion interfering with the government. If you read the amendment carefully, it's the government interfering with religion.
Right. And that is the point that Thomas Jefferson made in his letter to the Danbury Baptist so many years ago. Not letters, but phone calls at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Out to Idaho, to Nampa, where Bob is watching us today. Hiya, Bob.
All right.
You're on. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, I want to talk about the Democrat Party, how they've always tried to destroy America. First, they started with the Civil War because they wanted slavery. They lost that war, and there were various times throughout history they tried different things, and now they got people in that they think they're really going to get the job done with the illegal immigration that they're going through and all the lies that they come up with.
Bob, we appreciate your observation, and the point has been made, and I've made it here at this anchor desk. In my opinion, Lisa Ruth, if there were a situation where people south of the border were clamoring to get in here and they were going to register Republican, we would not see the likes of Hillary Clinton calling in her first 100 days for what she calls comprehensive immigration reform, but we know better to be amnesty. But apart from the political dimension, what was mentioned just a second ago by Michael, it's not classified information anymore. The fact is that for years, from Tehran to Caracas, there were plane loads of Iranians brought in, presumably taught Spanish, to then try to infiltrate into the United States. Do you believe that is ongoing?
Absolutely. Look at tradecraft. You know, again, I take this is how espionage works. I mean, if I arrive in a foreign country and say, hi, I'm an American, and I'm going to commit espionage, that doesn't work, you know. But if you learn Spanish or you learn Arabic or whatever, and you go under a false flag, that's the way to do it. We have a tendency to look at other countries as being stupid, and they're not. You know, the Soviets, when it was the Soviets, they played this game beautifully. They knew exactly what to do. Iran plays it very, very well. Know thy enemy, they know us very well. We don't know them nearly as well. But coming through the southern border with a Hispanic name, they come through Venezuela. We know Chavez used to welcome not only Iranians, but FARC, drug dealers, everyone else to come through. Yes, it's ongoing. I absolutely believe it's ongoing.
It is an ominous reality of our times that Ayub Hussein comes here now saying his name is Juan Menendez, coming across our southern border, and obviously a clear and present danger, which brings us to an observation Donald Trump made on the stump yesterday, which I've heard before. Take a listen.
So let me state very, very clearly. Immigration security is national security.
Little variation on what an old member of Congress used to say on the floor of the House and has said in this anchor chair. I would say it. Border security is national security, but he's taken it the logical extension. It's not only a protection of the border, it's who's coming into the country. Last word to you, Michael. Final 20 seconds.
1995, President Clinton's State of the Union address. He said everything that Trump said.
That's right. And now he's gone the other way because he and his wife say, hey, these are new voters. It used to be get out the vote. Now they want to bring in a new vote.
We have two voters in this country, two kinds of voters. We have those people that work for a living and those people that vote for a living. And that's what's bankrupting us.
That point, Michael Solomon, we appreciate your insights. And of course, Lisa Ruth, former CIA analyst, thank you for your analysis this afternoon. More of your calls are ahead, and our political panel will be here. We will also talk about a, quote, mistake made by the Department of Homeland Security with direct consequences for our immigration policy. All that and more as we continue.